So we hosting a leadership training here and near Barcelona in Casatilo. That is our new retreat center. And the leadership training is going to be in May from the 18th to 23rd. There's going to be a few days that we're going to be living together. It's a residential option. There's going to be a lot of practice and a lot of putting some of the leadership principles that we follow to the test. So we wanted to have a conversation between us just to share with you all how we think about leadership and also to nerd out about the topic that is really interesting to us. From your perspective, or what are the pieces that you're more interested in when we are talking about leadership?
Yeah, I can share something. In my experience with leadership, I found that it's really important to start with the nervous system, that in a way the nervous system drives all our interactions and constantly looks for signs of safety. Am I okay? Am I included? Do I belong? And when we lead groups, when we work in groups, it can be take up a whole amount of energy to have every nervous system sort of constantly looking for these signs of safety, and we actually don't get anything done or can think creatively together. So what I found really useful is to invest a lot of time as a leader in an organization to settle the nervous system of myself, but also create space for co-regulation and to allow people to arrive well, setting clear sort of frameworks and agreements, and, for example, checking in really intentionally together so people can actually settle their nervous system and arrive. And along with that, I think it's also really important to create a culture of belonging that also allows the nervous system to stay settled.
Mm.
Because our biology is really wired for like, do we belong in a group? Am I okay? Am I part of this crew, or am I being excluded? So once we feel like we truly belong or we feel safe in a group, we can actually do our best work. Yeah. So it's really about how do I show up as a leader and how do I regulate myself? And there's lots of practices to do that, but there's also group practices to allow a group to settle together.
Mm. It's so interesting, isn't it? It's like very subtle, like how you show up is such a subtle thing, not really something you're going to learn at business school, or
No,
it's not part
exactly.
of a usual curriculum.
Exactly. And it might sound a little soft, but in my experience, it's like it makes all the difference. It's really, I don't know, maybe you've also had the experience of like groups, just teams just really working under their potential. And then the flip side of that, suddenly when it clicks, it's just like boom, 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 and it just work happens really fast and in flow. And I think the difference between these two, there's a lot of aspects, and we'll talk about a few of them, but one key piece is how do our nervous systems co-regulate together?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So with Nati and me here running Casatilo, running lots of trainings and lots of retreats here, it's been so obvious. Like feels like we get a new chance to practice every week as a new group shows up. Uh, the quality of what's going on internally in our nervous systems as we greet people as they first arrive at that threshold, as we open an event when we say welcome. Like if people genuinely feel that welcome, then you watch how quickly they can settle in and get into the groove together and feel like, oh yeah, we're part of something. Like there's a collective identity forming here. And like you said about people feeling included and safe, that yeah, it's this very subtle internal calibration that like the inner state of people playing a leadership role has this enormous impact on all the people that they're interacting with, and then how they interact with each other.
Yeah, there's a piece here that I would love to dive deeper with you all. That I see it a little bit as a paradox with this, because I totally agree, right? Like how we show up as leaders is super important. Not just as leaders, but anyone that holds a lot of social capital, people that people look up to. All of those people are the ones that we will be trying to like mimic how they interact and how they are in a space. So then we can be like them, right? Like that's what's happening underneath, right? That was what we know through psychology. Um, And I'm always fascinated by this piece that we also talk about in terms of how do we show up as our honest, vulnerable, authentic selves, and how do we model that? While also as leaders trying to hold the space of being grounded and regulated. What happens when we don't feel that way? What happens when there's a lot of uncertainty in ourselves? What happens when, we looked at the news this morning and we're freaking out a little bit and we need to show up with both pieces at the same time, right? Because like the nervous system states gets transferred, not just the regulated one, but also the unregulated one. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the key there, I think what doesn't work is to be like, okay, I'll just pretend to be regulated
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
nobody will notice. Because I mean, yeah, even if you do that with small kids or anybody, it just doesn't work. Like people
No.
pick up on these like very subtle ways, like how do you greet them? How do you make eye contact? All these things. So what's been helpful for me, but it's a fine balance, is to be actually also vulnerable in my unregulated states as a leader. And it's not like unloading everything on the team but being honest, just being really honest with where I'm at. And it creates trust because people, when they sense that you're bullshitting them, they just don't trust you. They feel like, oh, something's off. And I
Yeah.
think we've all had that feeling. Ooh,
Yeah.
this is it's something's off. So
And why would I be on the level with you if you're not being direct with me?
yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's it. I've seen you do this plenty. Like if you have to give a speech at a conference or something, often you'll start by saying, "Woof, I feel a bit nervous about this. Like this is not my comfort zone."
Yeah.
And it's not like I suck at this. I'm an asshole. I shouldn't be here. You're not doing the big venting drama making thing, but just to be transparent, like, "Woof, this is not easy for me." And then getting on with it, I think makes it really kind of efficient and skillful way of letting people know what's going on.
And there's also that piece where it's like, okay, what if I'm freaking out about the state of the business? Like it happens as a leader, and you're like, wow, our funding just got cut, and I need to hold all of this, and I have the responsibility to the people that I'm leading, right? And how to show up in a sense, in a way that is honest. And it's like, yeah, I'm actually not very grounded today, or I'm feeling nervous about this thing that just happened, in a way that doesn't dysregulate the whole team and get them to freak out as well. So how do we do that? I think it's like you're saying, it's a fun balance, right? It's this space of being like holding myself and knowing that I'm holding a container. It happens as well as facilitators, I guess. While also knowing that whatever happens to me is going to ripple through.
I think when I'm in a leadership role, it's important that I have spaces where I can um, vent, that I can be unskillful, that I can be completely honest about my doubts and anxieties. And it's not appropriate to just do that wherever, whenever. Like that, I actually need some containment, and that, like, for me, it'll either be working with a coach or just having friends and people that are outside of the working relationships where I can have that, like, bah, and make a bit of a mess. And then get to the heart of the matter and realize there's always some kernel that is an important truth that can be communicated skillfully, and like bring that back to the team. But there is containment. There's this discernment of saying, like, what parts of me do I show up with in which spaces. Like we have talked in the past about bring your whole self to work, and I just think that, like, makes it sound more straightforward than it actually is in practice.
Totally. And I think for leaders, I mean, it can be, especially if you're working in a hierarchical setting, it can be very lonely to lead. And it's even more important to actually look for these spaces where you don't need to be contained. And what helped me, for example, a lot was I think 2 years ago or 3 years, the Hum hosted a leadership retreat I was actually a participant in. And it was so great to be among other leaders and have that space to exchange and really also vent and do things I would never have done with with the team because it was a safe space with peers, to actually vent. And then I can go back and be in a more I co-regulated with my peers and I can go back in a more regulated state and I can be honest with my team. I'm not pretending something's true that's not true, or things are better than they are, but I can have perspective and give perspective through that. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, I really like that idea of we have spaces where we can process what's happening, where we can vent, or we can, talk about it in an unskillful way if you want. We can just hear perspectives from others. We can rant about something. And that will help us process and understand better what's going on. So then when we come into the team or when we come into the spaces, at least we have the clarity to say, this is what's happening. This is how I've been feeling. This is why. This is, like a little bit more on the MVC side of things. These are my needs, and I've noticed that this is what's showing up for me in a way that also gives the others. It's like, okay, now I understand why this person might, like why I might be noticing them a little bit off or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think like with often my role will be understanding the finances more than most people. And like I could be completely transparent about every decision that's coming along, every doubt, every risk factor, and show everyone every line of every spreadsheet and just overwhelm them with the like complications and fears about what that means. And it doesn't seem really useful at all. It's like transparent, but for what end? I feel like my role is more about learning how to communicate. These are the important priorities. These are the big levers that we have to pull on. Like if this happens, then that happens. Like framing and inviting people into an understanding, that feels a lot more useful than just like giving them raw access to everything doesn't really achieve anything, I think.
I guess that plays a little bit with the idea of we can all lead in different parts, right? We all have a strength that we can bring. We're all like, even in our roles, if we have a more distributed work environment, then we might not have a leader of specific things, but we still have a strength and we're holding a specific piece of the puzzle, right? And it's not about, we all should know about finances. I know nothing about finances, right? So, but I can trust that you do, and that you're going to tell me what I need to know, and that I'm going to be involved in the decisions that I need to be involved in. And I don't need to be on every detail. And they'll be the same for different pieces of what we can bring, right? Like if you're better at leading on the marketing side of things, I'll, defer to you on how we communicate about things. I'll have an opinion, but I don't need to be involved in it.
I think that works because it's reciprocal, right? That like you'll follow me on this thing because I'm going to follow you on the other, and that we recognize that we've each got these different expertise fields.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all part of Enspiral, and I feel like that's where a network where when I went to New Zealand first, I was impressed by how they lived that principle of everybody leads sometimes and steps forward to lead, and others follow, and then steps back again to let others lead. It was a really skillful way to work in a very self-organized way. And I learned a lot.
Yeah, we had the first meeting of a new group here recently. We had a bunch of Enspiral people and then a bunch of local people from Catalonia kind of who were interested in the Enspiral ways of doing things. And it was just a one-day event, and it felt really exciting and like a lot of momentum, and people were like, oh, let's definitely meet again. It feels like there's some energy here. And that was so distinctive about the event that we created, was the way that people take turns to be in the front of the room. And it's not one person running the show, but it's also not this completely amorphous, chaotic, like, oh, what's happening? We're just a little afraid of anyone being in charge thing, but literally taking turns. Like there's an hour and it's your show and we're following you and we do whatever you want. But at the end of the hour, like your role kind of evaporates, and it's someone else's turn. That feels so alive. It feels so dynamic. Feels so much like creativity can come from there, and like fresh collaborations emerge from that way of working, I think.
Yeah, I think there's something, when we work with a lot of groups that they want to work in a more collaborative way, a lot of the things that we hear from the leaders is like, oh, I have so much responsibility. I'm holding all of this and I would like to share that. And it works both ways, right? That's what you were saying, right? Like I lead sometimes, but you all need to lead sometimes. This is the stepping back so someone else can also step in. And we need to have those two pieces working together. Because if I'm just going to give like, oh, you can have a lot of access to decision making and you're going to have a say, and that's what is interesting for people that maybe were more on a employee perspective before, that they have more access, but they also need to take on some more responsibility. And that sometimes can be tricky for the people that was holding everything to be able to support others into how do you take on more responsibility? What does it look like when we share that around letting go of things need to be my way, right? There's a lot of moving pieces into this. It's not so straightforward as, okay, now we're going to just share things.
Yeah, totally. Especially again in a hierarchical setting, then you have to lead upwards and downwards. Like you also have to create trust with your superiors. For example, in my case, a board or something, that it's okay for me to let go, let others lead. Me as a leader of the organization, let others lead, and that will be okay, because then often in that leadership role, you have hold all the accountability and you feel responsible. So it's really hard to let go of control. So it's really about creating a culture of, no, actually, it's okay. It serves the best outcome to share that burden of leadership amongst more people, and we can trust each other to do that. But it takes time. It's not easy to create that culture, in my experience.
Yeah, and not just like sharing the leadership outwards from a central point, but like with the groups that I'm starting, I always try to bake into that opening agreement about how people are invited in, that we're all here to step up. We're all here to like grow. We're all here to develop, to stretch outside of our comfort zone and to pick up new skills and to support each other in this growing process. Like that's part of what we're here for. Like we might be here to write a book or to ship a product, but we're also here to grow and become more capable people. And that in that framing, leadership is just like another opportunity for me to step up and another opportunity for me to develop myself. And that this is the part that I find the most satisfying is working with a new colleague who might be a little tentative and a little shy, and strategizing with them about, okay, like where's a situation where we can get you outside your comfort zone, but not overwhelmingly, we're not putting you in the freak out territory, and give you adequate support so that you know you can handle this, but it's yours. And then progressively ramping up over multiple interactions until they're really, sort of left that shy chapter behind and they just got this confidence and assertiveness and the buy-in from the other people in the team. Like watching that process kick off in people over the course of a year or two, I find like one of the most gratifying things about working with people.
Yeah, totally. It's you can really see the impact of your work right then and there. And I found that I also worked a lot with worker co-ops with women with migration and refugee backgrounds, and we were constantly striking that balance of like, where do we overwhelm people with like where do we overestimate people maybe and give them too much to lead, too much responsibility, and that can also be not productive, or where do we underestimate people and keep them small by like saving them, or like in a way like being like, oh, but it's so easy for me, so I'll just do it, you know. So this balance was always really hard to strike, and I think for me, I'm a person who had to work a lot on that, because I'm actually quite competent in a lot of areas, so it was always easy to just like do things myself, or like just felt like more efficient sometimes. And I really had to learn to be like, no, actually, what's the long-term outcome? I want this group to be able to thrive without me, and so I want to give opportunities for leadership and growth. So it's a really rethinking your role as a leader, more to be like a coach.
Which means like putting up with people doing it their way as well, which won't necessarily be my way and might not meet some of my standards. Like that's part of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. That's a really struggle for me as well. It's like, it's much easier for me to do it than to support someone slowly to get into the place where they can do it, but it's counterproductive in the long run, right? So I definitely also had overshoot where it's like, oh, I'm going to let them do it so then they can learn and they can do it their own way, because that's my way of learning, is by doing it, right? And finding my own way. And then luckily I asked for feedback about it, and people are like, well, actually, I would like a little bit more support. I would like a little bit more of you telling me what pieces I should be paying attention to, right? Like, so it's like finding that balance is kind of can be challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the key piece is inviting people in, as you said, Rich, also to have that conversations. What are your goals? Like, how do we want to design intentionally this developmental path together, and checking in about it, so that together you can find the right amount of support needed and the right amount of challenge.
Yeah, that is something I think we have in common that maybe we take for granted, is the design mentality. Like, to really think, how are we creating the conditions for success? And those conditions, like we've talked a lot so far about, the psychological safety and the emotional intelligence and the developmental stuff and this like more subtle interpersonal things, which is an important part of it. But there's also these other conditions which are like your decision-making protocol, like how does accountability function? What do you do with conflicts? Like these more hard-edged structures that usually someone in a leadership role is going to be responsible for bringing a lot of that into, and that design perspective of saying, okay, where are we losing energy? Like where are we being inefficient? Where are we getting distracted, or getting caught up doing pointless things? And like, how do we structurally intervene to bring out the best in people and to move us towards our goals?
Totally. Yeah, it's not just showing up with a regulated nervous system and being like, yay, that's it. No, it takes so much intentionality and design on all these levels. How can we use conflict to create trust rather than break it? And there's tools we can use to make it easier, right? Even just having regular, like an easy one is having regular retrospectives with the team. So important to catch conflict early, to have that mentality of, oh, we're learning together, we're constantly developing, we're designing this together. I mean, there's so many tools and practices that can make this easier and that have helped me. And actually, you also coached me a lot, Nati and Rich, to do that in my organization. So I'm really grateful for that.
Well, it's kind of confronting, right, to hear the way that things are not working. No one really wants to have that conversation. Like, oh, it feels bad, but it's this like temporary sting that you get over, and then it's like, okay, well, now we can deal with what's in front of us and be realistic about it, make improvements. It's funny, right? Like the decade of organizational development work that we've done, I think it boils down to
talk about it.
Good relationships, make good culture, and then talk about the problems, and then run experiments to change those problems. That's kind of the whole script. It's like you need to be able to communicate, and then you need to try things. Ta-da!
Ta-da! Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like the piece is like involving the others into what is that we're trying, involving the others into what is that is not working, not just from our own perspective of, oh, well, this is how I'm going to adjust things as a leader to make things different. Like, well, what do the others want? What do they think that we should do? How can we try something where everyone is engaged into like creating the conditions in which we all organize together? That's part of the responsibility, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And do that in a way that it doesn't take up all your time. Like you can also not sit in a circle and talk about these things nonstop because you have to get work done. That's the reality. And so it's like creating these containers where these conversations can happen in the right rhythms. I think you once shared like 20% of the time should be spent on these things more or less in a team, like team building, like reflecting, all these things to keep the health of it. It shouldn't be 50%, then you're not doing any work, but it also shouldn't be 5 because then potentially you're missing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, that number I think depends on how dynamic your working environment is.
Yeah.
Like maybe if you're a factory worker, you wouldn't need to spend so much time on like management questions. But
Yeah.
most of us, I think, are working in a really highly dynamic context where the landscape just keeps changing around us and we need to adapt. And that means we need people to understand, yeah, okay, last year this structure was working really well for us, but now actually things are quite different. And having that, developing that shared muscle of adaptability, like it just takes time and need to allocate time to it. So yeah, 10 to 20%, I think, at least.
Okay, so maybe we should talk a little bit about how are we going to cover all of this million topics that we just dropped in.
Well, I'm
And
just
also
going to be in the
Justin.
front of the room and I'm going to be talking for hours and hours and hours, and people are going to take notes and then
Oh,
they go home.
great.
And
Oh, it's a lecture.
it's a
Ah,
5-day
great.
lecture.
With Professor Richard Bartlett.
Blah, 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 blah.
No, so the idea that we have is like the point is that we can come together and experience all of this, not just experience it as in what does it actually look like in action when we do this together, but also can we bring some of the challenges that we're facing in our groups? Can we test it out? Can we talk about what doesn't work in our teams and try things differently within this container that will feel safe, where we are with peers, where we can, where we can fail and try again and do it multiple times. So the main idea of the time that we're going to be spending together is that in the mornings, we're going to give some frameworks. We're going to give some of these pieces. We're going to discuss them together. We're going to be talking about the collaboration rhythms. How do we set up these rhythms in which we can plan and we can work and we can reflect? What does that look like? We'll talk a little bit about vision and strategy, how to talk about strategy and also how to plan and separate those things, how to lift our eyes from the day-to-day to dreaming together. We're going to talk about how do we make collective decision makings, how do we involve people, how do we engage with our team to make the right decisions. We'll talk about psychological safety and what does it look like in practice, right? What is this nervous system? What does it look like to show up from that regulated state? How can we create spaces where we can co-regulate together? And we're also going to talk about the more like challenging things like conflict and resistance and polarization. What does it look like when that tension arises, as it always does, right? We're humans. When we collaborate, it's going to happen. So we'll bring all of the pieces in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we'll have more like role play, live practices. We're going to work in small groups where we will take turns. Each group will take turns to run some of the pieces. That each group is going to work as a little unit. So they're going to have to be practicing as well on the daily. How do we organize as a small team here together? And then we're going to have spaces for coaching and group peer support. So that's kind of the overall framing. I wonder if any of you two want to bring something else.
Yeah, I think there's also going to be a sort of underlying focus on the qualities that you need to develop as a leader. And important quality that we sometimes underestimate is like the fierceness, like bringing clarity and fierceness. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that quality, Rich, since I know you've been working with that a lot.
Yeah, fierceness or assertiveness or
Yeah.
just we've talked so far a lot about inclusion and creating this sense of wholeness, and I feel all these like warm and squishy feelings, and then there's also this like cutting through. Sometimes it's necessary to say like, okay, yeah, we've heard 1,000 ideas, but we need to make a decision on one, or we need to have some limit. The budget has limits, and we have to, some things are in and some things are out, and like how do you develop that clarity? Ideally, how do you create a culture where everyone has that ability to be clear about their boundaries, about their requests, about the decisions they're in and out? But even if you can't get the whole team, at least how do you as a leader hold that kind of clarity and assertiveness? And how do you find your own way that feels authentic to you to cut through and not get lost in the design by committee? We talk about collaborative leadership, but it's both collaboration and leadership. Like it's do both. I think that's going to be a thread running through the whole training is, how do you identify and strengthen your own distinctive leadership voice? And like right now, my one's about assertiveness, but someone else, they'll have a different sort of priority or a different fingerprint that they're trying to put on. So I think it's going to be a lot of introspection and reflection from other people and getting feedback from your peers as well in the space and calibrating and making some of these implicit things more explicit and getting a better sense of like, okay, this is who I want to be. This is how I want to show up. You know, this is the posture, or this is the almost the archetype or the personality that I want to put on. And this is the role that I'm growing into.
Totally. We can really also learn from each other and mimic each other in those qualities. We can be like,
Yeah.
oh, I see that in that person. I want to
Yeah.
develop that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go.
Oh, just the other stuff about the training. I think it's important detail. We're in this beautiful villa in Spain. It's mid-May, so the weather is going to be exquisite. It's going to be warm and sunny. Late spring, forest full of life. We're in a national park, so there'll be like a bazillion birds. There's 15,000 hectares of forest to explore. That's got a great chef, so the food's going to be amazing. And it's going to be a house full of like-minded people that you're really excited to meet and almost certainly leave with lifelong friends. Like that's an important part of what's going to be happening here as well, I think.
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be plenty of time to socialize, to like have those connections, to feel resourced by peers, and go back strengthened to your own settings.
Is there anything else we want to share with anyone that might be listening to this conversation? Maybe what could be interesting is like, what are our own learning edges in these leadership pathways?
When I really get stressed and overwhelmed, like I'm constantly dealing with a lot of responsibility and ambiguity and having to make tough decisions. And there's a point where I get oversaturated and I just can't make decisions anymore. What I need to learn is like how to recover from overwhelm in an efficient way and like not get stuck in it for days on end, but like, okay, I guess I'm having an early day this afternoon and I'm knocking off at 3 p.m. Like, okay, that's fine. And then tomorrow I'm back at it, rather than kind of collapsing and getting lost for days. So that's, I think, a sort of like nervous system regulation strategies for like snapping out of a phase that's not serving anyone, and like being able to recover efficiently, or find new ways to like reposition myself so that I'm like able to be useful again instead of getting stuck.
I'm currently not leading an organization. I'm nurturing a small baby. I'm on a bit of a break for motherhood, and I've reflecting back on the 10 years I've worked in leadership in nonprofits. I feel like I've always been very much overstimulated by just my head is able to keep a lot of stuff, like a lot of balls in the air, and I like can keep track of that. I have a good overview. But it also means that I don't really sleep very well at night, or like I can't turn off. It's like constantly running. So I think my learning edge is like, oh, how can I, or what I'm curious is how can I use this capacity that I have for leadership and in a more balanced way that's also more healthy for my work-life balance. Yeah.
I was trying to think about my one. I haven't considered it in a bit, but
you might be perfect already as you are.
Oh, thank you, darling. But no. I think it's probably more about how to balance the seeing what is not working with appreciating what it is. And that's something that I personally struggle with myself, as you know, I have a bit of a hypervigilant nervous system state sometimes that I can go on. Of course, it's based on my upbringing and who I am as a person, but trying to build that capacity for more appreciation. And then how do I bring that in a way that encourages people that I work with, instead of just, being always in, all of these areas that we can keep improving and growing on, that is useful, but balancing it with all of this is great. Okay, so
there's one other comment I wanted to leave as well with anyone listening in. Just to acknowledge, I think deciding to come to a training like this, it's a reasonably big decision. You know, it's a big commitment of time and money. And I don't know about you two, but definitely I'm up for talking to people. Like if someone's interested and has questions and like, I have some doubts, but seems, you know, something's calling me, but I really don't, can you tell me more? Like I really have every willingness to get in touch with people and just share more and get a better sense of this is a good space for them to be in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I'm going to drop in the comment of wherever this video is going to be. There's going to be links to the page, the sales page for the event, and an email where you can reach out to us and we can coordinate. Even if it's like a really short call to get to know us better and ask us whatever you need. Okay, then this is all for now, and we're going to be talking again soon. Thank you both.
Thank
you.
you.